Today's show, the Buccaneers pick up a big 23-3 victory over their nemesis, New Orleans Saints. It's the bye week. It's the halfway point of the season. What to expect from the Bucs in the second half of the season, I'll discuss next on this edition of the Bucs Report. Let's get it! Well, hello and welcome into this edition of the Bucs Report. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms. My name is Dan Holme. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. And the best way that you can help grow this show is to subscribe to the Bucs Report on YouTube, like the videos, comment anything down below. So in this edition of the Bucs Report podcast, the Bucs are rolling as they pick up a big win over the Saints. And to be clear here, this is not the Saints that we remember from years ago. This is not Drew Brees at the helm. This is the 1-7 New Orleans Saints, or Narland Saints, as they like to say it down there. But the Bucs riding high in the bye week, the midway point of the season, with a 6-2 record. And just to take a look at the lay of the land here a little bit, in the NFC South, the Carolina Panthers are in second place, a 500 record. Tell me if you had that on your bingo card to start the season. So, wow, how things are shaping up. And, you take a look at the Bucs. It was a nice victory, but let's just bring it back down to earth. Come on, let's take it back down to the earth here. This was a horrible New Orleans Saints team. And I understand that they're bitter rivals. I understand that Baker Mayfield hates the Saints. But at the end of the day, let's take it for what it is. And the Bucs, how many opportunities? Wasn't it like 8 opportunities that they were right on the cusp and they couldn't drive it in the end zone? That it was a good game. It was not a perfect game by any stretch. And if you take a look at the box score, for example, Baker Mayfield was 15 of 24, 152 yards, 0 touchdowns. Let's see who did score. Sean Tucker, a touchdown in the game. Antoine Winfield Jr. and Anthony Nelson, my man. What a game he had, stepping up in a huge role and all instrumental in the Buccaneers' victory. So it's all about tempering expectations. It's all about having the chip squarely on your shoulder and not getting too confident, right? That the Buccaneers have played well, but this is a team that is still besieged with injuries, and they're finding a way to rise above. And I guess that's ultimately what is encouraging for me. The thing I always talk about on this show, it's Baker Mayfield. We must protect this man at all costs, because the Buccaneers have found a way to rise up, minus Godwin and Evans and Jalen McMillan and Bucky Irving. This is going to be a completely different Buccaneers team if it's Teddy Bridgewater football, let's say. But let's talk about the Bucs and what we saw in the game versus New Orleans, and just let's dig into it here. So let's dive into that game. A 23-3 victory. On paper, you think to yourself, wow, that was a shellacking of the arch nemesis of the Buccaneers. If you look at it in a little bit closer detail, I'm here to tell you that Rattler is not on par with a Drew Brees that we saw from years ago. Really quick take, if there's any Saints fans out there watching or listening to this, you guys need a new quarterback, a true number one. The Buccaneers to start the season were like, is it going to be Baker Mayfield? Is it going to be I mean, you take a look at the Saints, they don't even have a really great number one option. And it's interesting, isn't it, that, a team that historically has done great things for years has been the thorn in the side of the Buccaneers more than one case. They don't have a true number one. And I know they've tried to retread that tire. They brought in quarterbacks post Drew Brees, and none of them have been the right fit something to address. Ultimately, I hope they don't fix it, but just something that I think about when I watch them play. But like I said, it was not the smoothest offensive day for Tampa. They had some struggles converting on third downs, only hitting 3 out of 13. So it's the truth in the numbers. You really got to kind of drill down on it to understand it at more of a granular level. And they even failed on the 4th and goal from the 1 yard line. Let that sink in. So it's not as good per se as the box score indicates. And I understand at the end of the day, it's all about W's and losses. And that's what it's all about. And the Buccaneers, well, they won this game. But the defense, man, they really stole the show. And if there's one guy that needs his flowers in all of this, Anthony Nelson, this guy had one of the best games of his entire career. He notched an interception. He returned for a touchdown, forced a fumble, and added 2 sacks in what was an incredible game for Anthony Nelson. And that's the depth I'm talking about stepping up. And, you know, the funny thing is Nelson even admitted he couldn't fully remember the interception play itself. He said he just went for the ball, caught it, and next thing he knew, he was in the end zone. Those are all those feel-good stories, those warm fuzzies that you get when you watch the game, that it wasn't, you know, Mike Evans in the end zone. It wasn't Godwin. It was a guy, Anthony Nelson, who in that moment was on top of the earth. Antoine Winfield Jr., also a huge impact. And the impact of this guy is not spoke of often enough. The Buccaneers are exponentially better with Antoine Winfield in the game in general, recovering a fumble and snagging an interception of his own. So overall, the Bucs forced 4 turnovers against the Aints. Those turnovers forced New Orleans to pull their starting quarterback, Rattler, later in the 3rd quarter. And let's just say that the guy behind him, well, he was no better, came in, but it didn't really turn things around for the struggling Saints. I got to laugh at it because, like I said, a team that has been a thorn in the side of the Buccaneers for years now sit at 1-7 and tied for the worst record in the league. Wow. You know, how far that team has fallen. Their first-year coach said they're trying to find the right formula to get the offense going, but it's clearly been a tough road. And, you know, kind of like I've said on this show before, different podcasts that I do I put a lot of the pressure on the head coach? I don't. It's hiring someone to build your deck and go, well, this is what we got. You got the job, contractor, to build us the deck. And you're like, wow, I am building a deck. Or in this case, I am the head coach of an NFL team, but not so fast. Let me see that drill. Let me see that saw. Let me see those fasteners. And you're like, I thought you wanted me to build your deck. I do, but I want you to do it without those tools. The same thing this head coach must face is, wow, I'm the head coach of an NFL team. Bad news, it is a horrendous Saints team. One of the worst I've seen in years. But back to Bucs in the offense. Baker Mayfield threw for 152 yards, 0 tutties, and no interceptions. And like I said, though, the offense was a bit inconsistent. And Mayfield himself said they have to be better. The Saints defense did hold Tampa scoreless at the goal line multiple times in the 2nd quarter, stuffing 4 goal-to-go attempts from the 1 yard line. That they tried to stuff it in there. They just couldn't do it. All things that need to get cleaned up. And they have some time to rest, to reset, and hopefully get some players back. That play was a massive momentum shift. Rattler was rolling right, looked for tight end, but Nelson tipped the pass, caught it himself, and took it back for a score. The man himself, Baker Mayfield, praised Nelson's performance, saying he was lights out all game. And I'll talk about later, he got recognized for that. But stat-wise, Nelson, what he did was pretty rare. He became the first player since 2023 to have an interception return for a touchdown, a sack, and a forced fumble. And this is a kind of a depth guy at the end of the day. There was even a chance for a second defensive touchdown when Winfield recovered a football and ran it back. But, you know, it's always the details. An early whistle killed that play. But, you know, the Saints, they forced Mayfield fumble shortly after and converted into a field goal to make it 7-3 at halftime. In the second half, another guy that's been huge after, I'm going to say, one-off game, Chase McLaughlin hit 3 long field goals from 52 yards or more, helping the Bucs pull away. For the Saints, Rattler finished 15 for 21, passing for 136 yards, but lost that crucial fumble. And in a lot of ways, unless they get a better option in there, they really need a better option. The backup, 17 of 30 passes for 128 yards, but threw an interception picked off by Winfield. The injuries weren't too serious for the Bucs. Cornerback Jacob Parrish got some treatment late, but walked off on his own. The Saints had some concerns as well, but looking ahead, the Bucs get a bye week 9 here before hosting the New England Patriots on November 9th. So you take a look at it. The Saints are off to the Rams next. And that's the state of where the Bucs are at the bye week here. That all things considered, I'm feeling good. It wasn't as great of a victory as it should be as a team. The Saints tied for the worst team in all of the NFL. So it's important to understand the win for what it is. I'm glad that they won. It wasn't a perfect win, but at the end of the day, I'll take it. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about Player of the Weeks. Players on the Bucs getting Players of the Week. Something that hasn't been done. 2 players. Who are they? I'll discuss straight ahead. All right, welcome back into this edition of the Bucs Report podcast, simulcast on the Bucs Minutecast feed, part of the Fans First Sports Network. So let's dive into segment 2 here and talking about 2 players recognized for their outstanding play. And it's not the sexy names that you're used to hearing. Is it Baker Mayfield? Nope. Was it Evans? Nope. Was it Godwin? Nope. Was it Bucky? Nope. Let's break it down here in the second segment and just really speaking about depth and speaking about special teams and how the Buccaneers have it in spades this year, success on all fronts. And it's a Player of Week double dip. Anthony Nelson and Chase McLaughlin both snagged the NFC Player of the Week honors for Week 8. Nelson took home the defensive award, and McLaughlin handled the business on special teams. As I look here, something that hasn't been done since way back in 2008. Pretty rare stuff. So let's unpack how they pulled it off. The Bucs dominated, at least on the score sheet, 23-3. This was a statement game, a game where both defense and special teams took turns putting the Saints in a box. Anthony Nelson, my man, this guy went off. 2 sacks, a forced fumble, a pick 6, all in one game. Actually, not just that, all in the first half. And that's the kind of defensive chaos you only see once every few years. In fact, Nelson became the first NFL player since 2007 to record multiple sacks, a forced fumble, and a pick 6 in the same game. And if you're outside of the Buccaneers circle, out of the Tampa area, not a Bucs fan, I'm going to go ahead and say maybe a name you're not too familiar with. The last guy to do something similar to that was Chicago's Khalil Mack back in 2018. That is elite company. But let's talk about special teams. And, Chase McLaughlin had that bad game a few games ago. Time flies here. And there was already talk about it. They're going to work out somebody else, And, what was important was to understand that players, are going to have bad games now and again. And Chase McLaughlin, big picture, 30,000-foot view, has saved the Bucs on many occasions and is one of the best in the game. He was nails in this game. 3 field goals, all from deep, 55, 54, and 52, just to show off at the end of the day, if you know what I mean. And he hit all of them in the second half, which is huge because those long kicks kept Tampa in control as they pulled away. McLaughlin, also added 2 extra points, finishing with 11 total for the day. So, when you see a big win like that, you think Mayfield. Think McLaughlin in this case. He's now perfect 8 for 8 this season from 50 yards or more, which, by the way, leads all of the NFL, the National Football League. If you're wondering how rare that is, only one kicker this year, Chris Boswell from Pittsburgh, hit 3 field goals over 50 in the same game. McLaughlin's one of just 4 players to make 3 50-yarders in a single half since 2020. So yeah, he is in a serious groove, and another player that we must protect at all costs, because when they spoke about maybe the Buccaneers need to try someone else out, it was quite apparent that there's not a lot of McLaughlins out on the market right now. We need him healthy, as he is instrumental and part of the secret sauce of the Bucs' success. It's also Nelson's first ever Defensive Player of the Week. McLaughlin been there once before. He won one with the Colts back in 2022. But get this, the last time 2 Buccaneers grabbed this weekly honor in the same week was 17 years ago. Derek Brooks and Matt Bryant pulled it off in 2008. So, when I say a good game, when I say it's rare, before that, you'd have to go back to the combinations of Rondé Barber and Bryant in 2006, or Donnie Abraham back in 99. So yeah, Nelson and McLaughlin just joined a pretty exclusive club, and it's all about the depth, right? And, like I say, you don't think about Anthony Nelson and Chase McLaughlin, I think, when you generalize the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But as far as the Bucs, they didn't win. They completely shut down the Saints. The defense held them to 3 points. Nelson was living in the backfield. That pick 6 was something that I've thought about, when I've thought about the Bucs play, that, wow, that was a momentum changer, that despite the fact that the Saints are horrible, that definitely stymied any progress that they had. And that pick 6 ultimately flipped the momentum right after New Orleans had a goal line stand. Talk about a turnaround. And thanks to McLaughlin's long-range accuracy, Tampa just kept extending the lead and shutting the door in the Saints' face. So a lot to be happy about here. And, talking about special teams player of the week award this season, remember week 1, punter and return man Cameron Johnson snagged the title then. And for defense, Nelson's the first to earn the honor this year. The last time was Yaya Diaby in week 17 of 24. So it's safe to say the defense keeps finding playmakers, and a pretty special team that the Buccaneers have this year, right? That it's important to understand the lay of the land and how great this Buccaneers team is. How deep do they go, right? Can they win the NFC South? It seems like a foregone conclusion. But if this team makes it to the playoffs, are they built of the kind of fabric that is a Super Bowl contender? I guess it depends on how healthy they are. I guess time will only tell. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about the Buccaneers at the halfway point of the season. We're halfway up the mountain, looking up. Is there dreams of grandeur? And are those dreams of grandeur, are they based in any type of reality? I'll discuss straight ahead. All right, welcome back into this edition of the Bucs Report podcast, your weekly water cooler stop to sit here and get down to one knee and listen to everything about the Buccaneers, the lay of the land. And I'm so glad that you guys decided to join me today. Again, subscribe, follow wherever you find your podcast, primarily on YouTube. Let's blow it up here, get it really big. And also, like I said, simulcast on the Bucs Minicast podcast feed. But let's talk about segment 3. And it's kind of just, where we're at right now, the measuring stick of where the Buccaneers are. Pretty good, all things considered. But, you take a look at it. I'm a realist. Sometimes I've been accused of being a glass half empty kind of guy, that the Bucs are 6-2, sitting atop of the NFC South. But the NFC South is surrounded by some subpar teams. I'm just going to be honest here. Tampa, king of the hill. But in that breath, Carolina 4-4, Atlanta 3-4, and New Orleans 1-7. Things are going well, and the Buccaneers don't have a choice of where they play. They play in the NFC South, but to contrast, other teams, you take a look at Green Bay, 5-1 in the North, Philadelphia, 6-2 in the East. But the Buccaneers, 6-2 on par with the Eagles. They stand and they reign supreme in what I'm going to say is a pretty poor NFC South. So let's dive into the final segment of the show. And we're at the halfway point of the 2025 NFL season. The Bucs, I think they're for real. They've had to overcome a lot. They've had to overcome a lot of injuries to some key players. And it's Todd Bowles having to prove who he is yet again. That, we could talk about in seasons before, not going for it when he should go for it. Like, hey, should we go for the field goal or should we go for the touchdown? And he would always go for the safe thing, or clock management, that we need to put that all in the rear view mirror, that the Buccaneers are playing well, and Todd Bowles deserves a lot of the credit, despite what you might think of him. And there were questions about injuries, some roster depth, all of that, but Bowles has this team locked in. They're proving they can hang with anybody in the league. And to be honest, they're not just hanging around, they're winning. And even when things get dicey in games, the Buccaneers find ways to win. That toughness Bowles keeps preaching, it's showing up every single Sunday. The comeback kings. Through 8 weeks, Tampa has pulled off 4 fourth quarter comebacks. 4. That's the most in all of the NFL. And, I don't like it that way, because those are not decisive victories. Again, to circle back to the first segment, it's all about wins and losses, right? But those games where they were comebacks, they were kind of a coin toss, right? They could have gone either way. The Buccaneers might not have that luxury in the second half of the season, where you're going to need to deliver. That we can't see what we saw against the Saints, where you had the opportunity to sometimes it was 1 or 2 yards to get it in there and you couldn't convert. Those are going to be costly in the latter part of the season. That I'm glad that in a lot of ways they got lucky in the first half of the season, a lot of those games, but they need to slam the door on their opponents when given the opportunity. And when you look at that stat alone, I'm talking about those 4 fourth quarter comebacks. They're trailing by a touchdown or locked in a tight one. They keep their composure, and that's what defines good teams. Mental toughness. And again, they're doing it in, the high water mark here in the last 10 years, of course, was the Brady era, right? When it brought a Super Bowl back to Tampa. And there was a lot of questions about who this Buccaneers team was going to be, right? After that, they're answering those questions. And Bowles' message about staying poised and physical, and how Baker Mayfield, the leader on this team, make no mistake about it, the driving force of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is Baker Mayfield, and he's standing in quite a big shadow. But in a lot of ways, when you take a look at the analytics, I hate to say it. I don't hate to say it. It is what it is, that Baker's even the better quarterback than Brady. And that winning culture, it's part of their DNA now. The defense has been clutch, making stops when it matters, and the offense, they've learned to thrive in chaotic situations. Players like Rachaad White, Tez Johnson, Emeka Egbuka have all stepped up when the Stars have sidelined. Bucky Irving out. Take a look at the wide receiver round. Godwin, Evans, McMillan, greatly diminished. And Egbuka, Tez Johnson, these guys stepping up. And remember in the past when we've been out with Evans, Godwin before, what that's meant years before. And Bucky Irving, what that's meant. Rachaad White trying to bring prominence back to his name, right? And that's one of the things to factor in. And that speaks to depth. That speaks to trust in the systems. And look, this isn't about flukes or lucky bounces. I don't want it to be that way. It's about a team that is built to compete, that there's contingencies in there, that this player got injured. For a lot of other teams, that's over. It's it. The Buccaneers have the depth to overcome. You watch them, you see the confidence, the kind of confidence that usually belongs to teams that know they're headed to January football. Is that the Buccaneers? I think that's the case. Baker Mayfield making the case as an MVP. Let's talk about Baker. The man's been quietly, and I mean quietly, putting together one of the best seasons of his career. Despite dealing with nagging injuries and a rotating cast of receivers, he's keeping the defense humming. He's thrown for over 1,900 yards already, 13 touchdowns, just 2 picks, and completing about 63% of his passes. The ghosts of interceptions past have not come back to haunt him the way they have before. But what we've seen from him, the efficiency, the leadership, the clutch play, all rolled into one quarterback. And the Buccaneers were lucky enough to land him. He was snickered at, like, oh, Baker Mayfield, you got that guy that's bounced around the NFL? You're damn right, and I would have it no other way. And you know the thing about Baker, he's not just putting up the numbers, he's setting the tone for the locker room. He's the leader, and you can see it. And how the team feeds off his energy, the way he carries himself late in games. He's become the steadying hand in Tampa. After, so many turnovers that we saw from him in years before. And honestly, if we're talking MVP candidates right now, you simply cannot keep his name out of the conversation, not with the way he's performing in crunch time. And look at the fourth back comebacks alone, taking this team on his back and carrying them across the finish line, putting himself in great peril. If this man is not in the hunt for MVP conversation, I don't know when that will be. He's the reason Tampa's playoff chances look as strong as they do heading into November. I don't want to get too ahead of myself here, but we're where we're at. But big picture, let's take it up. 30,000-foot view. The NFC South is there for the taking. The Saints, well, they're staying nice and chilly down in the cellar. The Falcons are inconsistent, and Carolina is, well, surprising, right? I don't think anyone saw that after the horrendous seasons that we've seen from them in the past. Tampa's sitting pretty with a balanced team, disciplined defense, a quarterback playing with heart, and a coaching staff that finally figured it out. If they stay even moderately healthy at some point, say you see Evans and Godwin and McMillan, in the talk there, and not to mention Bucky, you're looking at a team that can go toe-to-toe with the best teams in the NFL. And that's not hyperbole. That is not me being a homer for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I'm telling you right now, no one's going to want to draw the Buccaneers in January. Not when they're this gritty. Not when they're playing like this. And like I said, Bull deserves serious credit too. He's adapted. He's adjusted. And you start hearing his name in Coach of the Year chatter. Can you believe it? The guy that's been on the hot seat every damn year that he's been the head coach. There's chatter about that. That this team, has the makings of truly great things. That's the big thing. He's the one that's orchestrating all of it. So the elephant in the room is what is next for Tampa. They got some big tests coming up. Tough defenses, conference matchups that'll really show if they're ready to take it to the next step. But the first half of the season, if it's shown us anything, it's this team can respond. They might bend, but they damn will not break. That's when you drain the goddamn whole wide receiver pond, and it's the Johnson & Johnson out there. And still finding ways to win football games. If Baker keeps doing Baker things and the defense keeps delivering in those crucial stops, we could be talking about the Bucs as one of the NFC's most complete teams by Christmas. So yeah, the Bucs are back, baby. And they're not just a fun story. They're a legitimate threat. All right, I want to thank you guys for joining me on this edition of the Bucs Report. Let's get hyped. We're in a bye week, but, at the halfway point of the season, we've got to be feeling good about this team. There's been a tremendous amount of obstacles put in their way. And in yet, the Buccaneers continue to find a way to reign supreme. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of the Bucs Report podcast, part of the Bucs Report Podcast Network. And I'll talk to you again next time.